And Ilana will send everyone the link sometime in the next couple of days, probably tomorrow. I'm going to mute you all, but you can unmute yourselves if you have questions or comments. And this thing is going to take an hour or so. We'll take a break at 7:45 for about 5 minutes to give me a chance to read the chat questions. I can't see your, I've enabled chat, but I can't read the chat comments while I'm presenting. So if you have questions, I would actually ask you to unmute yourselves and just ask them orally while the information, the questions are fresh. But if not, if you want to put comments in the chat, I'll try to read them later before we end and answer your questions. Going back to what I was sharing before, as I told some people earlier on, this is a screenshot of my web page for this class. I've taught this class 3 times, both on, or this is the 3rd time, both about Ebird on computers, plus using the Ebird app. And there's slides for both on the web page if anybody's interested, along with some best practices and some getting started with Ebird and how to register for a free account with Cornell and download the app and so forth and so on. So tonight we're going to be, through the wonders of the internet, we are hopefully going to be talking about using the Ebird app on your phone, and we're going to be doing it live and in person and not with slides, I hope. So let's see how this works. That's probably not what I want. That's what I want. So hopefully everybody is looking at a screen mirror of my phone. And now you should be looking at a screen mirror of the Ebird app, the starting page, with a lovely picture of the Seine River in Paris behind it. So in order to use the Ebird app on your phone, the first thing you need to do is make sure that your location access is on. And if you're a Luddite like me, I usually keep the location access turned off. So you'll need to remember to turn that on if you're like me. And here we have the opening page of an Ebird checklist showing the date, showing the time, showing that record track is on. This will show you a map of where you're walking, and it will track your time. It will track your distance walked or driven. Up here at the top on the 3 bars, there's some items that you can look at, including the settings down here. which we're not going to discuss too much. They're pretty self-explanatory. The account, this will obviously show your username. And probably most important, X. And we'll discuss that in a second. So I'm not going to spend any more time on that right this second. So assuming you're ready to go and you've got location access on, you hit Start Checklist. And it'll take a minute to figure out where you are. You don't need to have cell phone access to use Ebird in the field. As long as you have your location access on and you have GPS access to the satellites, it will figure out where you are. So it's already figured out that where we are, and it shows the elapsed time running, and it shows that tracking is on. And here's a checklist of all the species. Down here is a comments field. And if you check on that, you can add comments. I'm going to say right now that I find that doing a lot of typing in the eBird app is somewhat difficult. And if you look at my big old fat bent fingers, you can figure that out. I think it's much easier to submit the checklist to your computer and do a lot of the inputting comments and editing your effort and so forth and so on your home computer rather than trying to do it on your phone. But that's up to you. Comments are always welcome. The weather, where you actually walked, things like that, conditions are all really handy. Don't forget that in addition to creating a checklist for yourself, eBird is becoming a global database, and there are a lot of researchers that that depend on it. So the more you put in, the more useful your data is going to be. So we'll get out of checklist comments, and let me back up a second here. This shows you how your checklist is sorted, and we'll discuss that in a second too. So the first thing we want to do, is to actually pick the point. So hit auto selected, and this is going to show a bunch of locations near where you are, and you're going to see a bunch of personal locations and more personal locations. And finally, if you scroll down far enough, you're going to see the nearest hotspot. It's 0.6 miles away, Canyon Lakes Golf Course and neighborhood. And Cornell really encourages you to use hotspots and not personal locations. The rule of thumb for using a hotspot is you should be birding within 5 miles of the hotspot, and the habitat should be reasonably similar to that of the hotspot. So we are going to use this hotspot, and I think for the Christmas in May bird count, I think that the compilers are asking you to use the nearest hotspot, the nearest applicable hotspot to your location. So we tap on this location, eBird checks for updates and updates the checklist. And you can see up here in this small type, it says likely species based on 929 checklists in a 20 kilometer by 20 kilometer area. So these are the checklists that you're, or the species that you're most likely to see for where you're birding. And let me just show you why it's important to use hotspots, not personal locations. This is a species map inquiry on eBird for Western Sandpiper for the San Leandro area. And you can see the hotspots or the pinpoints with the flames in them, and all the other locations are personal locations that people have put in. And you can see that there are a dozen or 13 hotspots in this small area, and yet look at all the people that just let their phones pick the personal locations for where they were birding. This ends up being not only is it a mess on the map, but for researchers, it's a real problem because instead of looking at being able to look at 12 or 13 hotspots, they have to look at all these personal locations to winnow through the data. And, here's somebody that could have used the Oakland Airport hotspot. They could have used this hotspot. Even somebody posted sightings from the famous shorebird location at the intersection of Davis Street and East 14th Street in San Leandro. I don't know if anybody's ever seen a Western Sandpiper at the Sizzler restaurant there, but there you go. So use hotspots, please. So back to eBird. We talked about the checklist order. If you tap on the 3 bars down here, it will give you a choice of smart sort or taxonomic sort or showing rarities. Smart sort is probably your best bet. It shows the most likely species in taxonomic order, most likely species for where you're birding, and goes all the way down to the warblers and cardinals down here. And then you get another list, a sub list, also in taxonomic order of species that are less likely for where you're birding. And again, all the way down to the warblers. And then finally, you get a list of birds that have never been reported for this 20 by 20 kilometer area. And if you choose the show rarities option, of course, it inflates the checklist by an order of magnitude with a lot of rarities that you'll never see. You don't need to have the show rarities turned on in order to post rarities if you actually see one, and we'll come to that at the end of the presentation. But for the time being, I would urge you to use the smart sort setting. And I forgot to talk about one thing, so let's go back for a second. Oops. That's no help. Okay, up here in the three horizontal bars in the upper left, it shows you packs. And if you tap on that, it shows you the species lists that are available to you. And obviously for where we're birding, the California list is best, and you can see that it's installed. If you're new to eBird and you just don't downloaded the app, you'll need to go into uh, this setting and choose which packs you want. And they're pretty big files, so it's up to you if you want more than just the California pack. So back to eBird. So now we're going to edit
Steve,
Yo.
I have a question. So someone just posted in the chat that they're trying to download a pack and they're not, they've been waiting and they wanted advice. It's just spinning for 5 minutes. It's just is that just typical?
Spinning. That's me.
Hi.
Okay.
You got me.
Does California take forever to download? I'm on a 6S. I don't know if that makes iPhone 6S. I don't know if that makes a difference.
It's been a long time since I've downloaded a pack, so I'm not much help, but it seems to me that it does take quite a while, and it also seems to me that I've had to try several times in order to get them to download. So.
Oh, and when you say quite a while, are we talking in minutes or hours or some range?
An hour?
So this is Viviana. I actually do download them fairly frequently because I like to travel in Bird, and so I pick up packs from different places. And it takes some minutes, but I'd say it's in the like 10 minutes range or 15 minutes range, unless you're it's a very large pack. Like you can choose like the pack that would be Western US, which is much bigger than just California, and that's going to take a lot longer than California. California is a pretty big pack relative to many others, but
we got lots of birds.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ori, for pointing that out. Appreciate the button there.
Yeah, of course. No problem. Best to deal with these questions as they come up, I think. Viviana, it's nice to know you're on here, and if there's anything specific to the count that you want to mention, or if anything that I overlook, just horn in.
Okay, thank you.
We're doing this for you.
Yeah. So I will mention one thing about the hotspots because it's applicable both for now and probably even more so for the Christmas count. So that in general, there should be plenty of hotspots that are applicable to where you're going. But if it happens to be that there's a like a new park, for example, that East Bay Regional Park creates new parks, or municipalities do, or some place which is regularly birded and would be birded, for example, on the Christmas bird count, and there's not one, there are ways of encouraging the eBird reviewers to create a new hotspot. And again, it's good to stay away from personal hotspots, but you can always email me if you want some help in getting that new hotspot created. Which is always balanced again. If there's an applicable hotspot, we don't want any new ones. We don't want an excess of them, but sometimes it makes sense.
Is the blue hotspots and the red hotspots, are they different?
The red hotspots are ones where there's been a sighting of the particular species you're looking for within the last 30 days.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Okay. And yeah, once again, the rule of thumb is within 5 miles and reasonably similar habitat. So, you know, if there's a hot spot in the middle of San Francisco Bay that's within 5 miles of where you're birding, but you're birding on land, that would not be the hot spot to use. Okay, so we're going to enter one whole species for our list, and there are several ways to do it. We're going to enter white-crowned sparrow, and you can do it by simply scrolling all the way down, or you can start typing the name of the bird in the search bar, and here's white-throated, white-tailed, white-breasted, and here's white-crowned sparrow here, and along with the subspecies. And you'll notice that you need to know how to spell the common name at least reasonably right. If you try to call it white-crowned, whoops, there I am trying to type it into the computer, white-crowned, it without a space, it doesn't recognize it. But it does recognize it without the hyphen if you do just put a space in. Anyway, so here's white-crowned sparrow. And let me back up 1 second. So there are a couple of ways you can enter the number you've seen. You can just tap on the plus sign right there, 1, 2, 3, 4, and just keep tapping if you haven't seen too many. Or you can tap on the species name and you'll get this box here that gives you some other options. You can put in, for example, 10, or if you don't want to count them and you want to use the old reliable X, you can put a check mark there, which will put an X on your checklist, which for the purposes of a bird count like you've signed up for, that's not very helpful. So we don't encourage that. I'll put 5 in here for the second. You can type some details in here. And once again, I think it's much easier to do it at home than typing in the field in this little box. And you're probably going to see some breeding activity. So here you can put in breeding codes. And unfortunately, this is not real helpful if you don't know the codes. If you do this at home, the codes are all have descriptions on them, so it's a lot easier to figure out which one you want. But you can hunt around a little bit. There's carrying, nesting. Oh, that's not the one I want. Let's try another one. Visiting probable nest site. Anyway, there are several, and let me go back in here for a second and just one more comment about typing details in the field. When I first did the research to teach this class last fall, I talked to a number of Ebird County editors, and they all had warnings and concerns about how much bad information gets put into Ebird, especially by people using the app in the field and not double checking it at some point before they submit it. Kimball Garrett, who's the Ebird County editor for LA and also a famous birder in his own right, wrote a wonderful screed that's on my website about the dangers of Ebird app. And I find it myself. I come home and I find stuff that I've butt dialed. I think I ended up with a penguin on one of my lists not too long ago. It's just real easy to make a lot of mistakes. So I really encourage you to submit your checklist and then go home and check them on your computer. Or if you don't want to do that, at least sit down at home with your phone and go over your checklist and make sure that you have everything correct before it gets out too far. So there's white-crowned sparrow, and obviously entering any other species is very similar. We'll talk about entering rarities here in a little bit. And I guess it goes without saying that you should only enter species observations to the level of your confidence. So if, not that you're going to see a lot of white-crowned sparrows this time of year probably, but you know, if you see crowned sparrows and you can't tell if they're white crowns or golden crowns, then just put them in as zonotrichias. You know, don't put in subspecies if you're not absolutely sure of what you're looking at. Don't put in a subspecies just because that's what's expected where you're birding. So my recommendation is to be conservative in your observations. So when you're finished birding and you want to get out of the checklist, I think every phone's a little different, but on my phone, I hit the observation thing to bring up the keyboard menu, and then I hit the checkbox down here, and it asks me if I want to stop, and it shows that we've got one whole species, and hit stop, and it says if you're going to quit, stop the track now, which we shall do, and you end up with a review screen. And another way to create a nice error in your checklist is to forget to stop the track when you're done, and we'll talk about that in a second. So up here it shows the date, shows where we've been birding with a chance to edit your location. It shows that we've been in a stationary location, and I'm actually going to change that for educational purposes. Stationary location is one where you've stayed within 100 feet of your starting point. And since most of you won't be doing that, we'll change this to traveling just for the sake of educating you. Number of observers, put in the number of observers that you're with, your time, and your mileage. And I've been sitting here the whole time, but the Ebird, the GPS satellites have shown that we've walked around the street in front of our house. One word about the track. The rule for mileage is, well, let me back up a second. Cornell really likes you to use tracking. It shows researchers exactly where you've been birding. So even if you're using a hotspot and you haven't put in comments that describe exactly where you've been birding, the track shows the researchers where you've been birding, and it's a help in describing the habitat and so forth. even if you are like me and tend to keep your checklist on paper and pencil while you're in the field, you can still turn tracking on and submit a checklist with no species at all and finish it off at home, and you'll still have the track, and you'll have your distance, and you'll have your time in the field and so forth. So there are lots of ways to use the app. The track won't show on public checklists. They show to the researchers, and they show on your personal checklist. So even if you're using tracking, it's a good idea to put a description of where you've been birding in your checklist so that other birders will know where you're talking about, because they won't be able to see your track. And finally, the track tracks all your mileage, but the rule for eBird and also for Christmas bird counts is that if you're on a out and back route where you're walking out someplace and turning around and walking back the same way, you only count the mileage one way, even though you count all your time in the field. And so if you're on an out and back, you will need to do I have it here? I don't see it. Oh well. You will need to manually adjust your mileage to remove the additional mileage on your return trip. And you can edit your track. But if you do, it also not only adjusts your mileage, but it adjusts your time. So it's a double whammy because you want to record all your time. So I'm not sure what the use of editing the track is, because it just screws you up even worse. So my recommendation is just leave the track alone and edit your mileage manually. If you do want to edit the track, you have to do it on the phone. Once you submit your checklist to the eBird website, you can no longer edit your track.
Yeah. Steve?
Yo.
There's a alternate way that you can do it too. If you're on a out and back, you could just and it's what I typically do, and you can tell me if you see any problems in doing it this way. I stop the track when I reach the end point of the out, because in any event you don't want to recount the birds that you've already seen when you're walking back, unless you have a different number. For example, that you on the way out you saw 2, but on the way back you saw 5 white-crowned sparrows, so you can change it to 5. But otherwise, I leave it as is. And then when you get back, you can actually hit the symbol that's next to the minutes there, the clock, I guess it is.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and you can hit that clock, and it'll change the time to the time, the intervening time. So you'll have the mileage of the out, and you'll have the time of the entire way.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. That's good to know.
So, and I can actually tell you why it's really great to be able to do tracks, is because sometimes I forget to turn it off, and I drive away in my car, and all of a sudden I've gotten several miles down the road, and I remember to turn it off, and that way you can just edit the whole thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, that's a good point. I didn't know that about the clock, and I'm hopeless that way. I would never remember to I would never remember to stop the track on the way back. But if you folks are more organized than I am, God bless you. And it's a sounds like a great solution. And I can echo Viviana. I I drove halfway home from Shadow Cliffs one day without stopping the checklist, and I'll bet the county editor is wondering what kind of birds we were seeing in front of Gene's Fine Foods in Pleasanton. But anyway,
Can you restart a track?
Can you restart a track?
Like say you're doing a back and halfway, wild and halfway back, and then you take a different trail. Can you restart the track at that point?
I think the track is linked to the checklist. So the only way you could have a new track is to start a new checklist. If that's what you're asking.
Okay.
So otherwise, let me see if I can, if I can find this real fast. So here's a checklist. Is everybody seeing this? Yeah. Here's how the track shows up on your checklist. And this is from Eden Landing over in Hayward a few weeks ago. You can see that this would have been an out and back portion, and you would have had to adjust the distance to take out the return portion of this. And this is the way it shows up. This is the way Ebird tracks it. So, just wherever you were, it shows your path.
Steve, I have a question about entering species. It's Linda Valley.
Yeah.
We say like
Hi.
gull spa or scop spa or Western versus Clark's, and we're not sure. You can do that in here? Can you enter you don't know, like, as I say, for a Christmas bird count, there's a place where you can say gull spa or Acmorphous grebe or scop spa.
There it is. There's gull spa.
Okay.
And I believe that yeah, and there's Western and Clark's grebe. So it's it's the same checklist that you would find in Ebird on your computer. So yeah, it's all there. I think.
Yeah, I actually haven't used Ebird, so I'm thinking more of the paper stuff that we did for the the sheets that we use for the Christmas bird count traditionally.
Right. So they're your crown sparrows there. If you can't.
Okay.
So yeah, it's that's all taken care of.
Can I ask another question about the tracking? The not double counting the same path, is that a Christmas bird count rule, or is that an Ebird rule?
It's are you talking about double counting the species?
No, double going like out and back on the same path and not counting the mileage.
It's actually both.
It's both.
Yeah, it's a long-standing Christmas bird count rule, and Cornell adopted it as their rule as well. So it's always seemed a little counterintuitive to me, but there again, the rule is you only count mileage one way, but you count all your time in the field.
Yeah, it just seems to me like a bug if the program itself doesn't take care of that. If you have to manually go in and calculate how much of your path is doubling back.
Well, that's true. And on the other hand, before the app, most people had no idea what the distance they were walking anyway. I mean, the mileage, the mileage statistics in Christmas bird counts must have a tremendous error rate because, you know, how do you know how far you've walked?
True.
Um,
And I think you can also kind of take a reasonableness standard to it too. So if you know, you walked a little bit and you doubled back again, I think most people would not bother taking that out. So, but it's nice at least not to double count the entire length of your 2-mile jaunt. So,
Right.
But I wouldn't worry about small little, you know, you go up a hill to look at something and you come back down again. It's so much better than as Steve just mentioned, it's so much better than the mileage that people, try to estimate before. It's still going to be much more accurate.
Thank you.
Yeah, and while we're on that subject, I would say that if you start reading the eBird best practices, you can get really scared because you're going to think that, oh, I can't do all that. That's too much. You know, if you're careful about your observations and your IDs and you're careful about getting reasonable counts, you're going to be adding a lot to the data, and you know, you don't want to get too fearful um, about your input, your checklist. I mean, you can if you follow all the eBird best practices, you can spend 2 hours birding and then another 2 hours on your checklist. And um, I would just say that's fine if you want to do it, but it's also you're adding a lot to your own experience and to the data if you're just careful about what you do and put in a reasonably careful checklist without getting too scared about dotting every I and crossing every T.
Steve, a question for you. This is Roberta.
Yeah.
Question. So we're going out, four of us are going out. I think everyone has split up for the May bird count. I think there are groups of 4. I would imagine that only one person is going to do the loading to eBird. Wouldn't it get confusing if everybody does the same thing? It'll be duplicative. What's the policy about that?
I will defer to Viviana since she's the boss.
Yeah. So in general, it's a good practice if you're actually birding together with somebody, like you're in the same little group and you're walking in the same places, that one person submits it. And I think Steve is likely to show us how to share a checklist
coming up.
Yeah. And so it's a great way of, like, only one person has to bother doing a checklist and everybody gets it. And if you actually see different things and you want to get down to that level of detail, each person gets an electronic record of it, and each person can switch it for themselves. And the eBird program counts the maximum number. So your checklist can be individualized, but only one person has to input it in the beginning.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so we're coming up to that point right now. So here we are after we've finished and we've stopped our track, and we're going to go to the review screen, and there's our one species. We're going to tap review, and here we have already said that we're traveling, the number of observers, the number of minutes, the number of miles. Are you submitting a complete checklist of the birds you were able to identify? Please always submit a complete checklist. That doesn't mean that you have to look at every bird or identify every bird you've seen. It simply means that you're including everything you saw that you could identify, including stuff you don't care about, like starlings and pigeons and mourning doves. But it, for a variety of reasons, submitting complete checklists is much more valuable from a data standpoint than putting in incomplete checklists. So we will say yes. And we will hit submit. And checklist submitted. Oops. And well, I messed up. I was looking for the sharing button, and I missed it.
I think you have to have more than one observer to have a share button come up.
You're absolutely right. And I believe we may have to start a new checklist. I believe that that you can't share a checklist after it's been submitted, but we'll see. So 2, no.
You can share it when you get home, right?
Yeah, once you've submitted the checklist, you can no longer share it from your phone. So here we are with another bogus checklist, and I'll go into Ebird and delete these after we're done. But anyway, here's the sharing icon on the phone, and you would enter either the Ebird username or the email addresses associated with the account to share the checklist with somebody. And you can edit the checklist as much as you want until you share it. Once you share it, that shared checklist becomes that person's, and any changes you make to your checklist won't show up on theirs. And I'm probably gonna get Viviana to talk a little bit about how they want to share a checklist, but here are some of the count areas you're going to be looking at, and right here is the format that she wants you to use for sharing. So take it,
Right.
Viviana.
Yeah, so again, like you can to share it with your companions in the field, you can ask them for either their username that they've used for eBird or the email that they use for eBird. Either one will work, and you'll put it in. And actually, the nice thing about it is if you do multiple checklists, it'll show you the list of the ones that you've put in recently. So if you had a group, if you were birding Roberta with a group of 3 other people, and they all are eBirders, and you put you were doing the eBird checklist for the whole group, and you ask them either their email address or their username, and you put it in. If you put it in once, and you had those 3 people on one checklist, those 3 people will show up again on your, if you do another checklist soon afterwards, you'll get that 3 grouping of 3. So you can just hit once. For the but the one that we definitely want you to share with, besides sharing with your companions, is to share it with a list that's for the that we're double counting for the Christmas bird count. And so that's those 4 letters that are the CAOA come from the Christmas bird count, and then it's an underscore and your 3-letter count area. So the example here is for Bay Farm Island, but if you were birding in Lake Merritt, instead of CAOA underscore BFI, you would use as a username CAOA underscore Lake Merritt is LKM. Does that make sense to everybody?
Perfect.
Or if it doesn't, speak up and I'll try to explain it more clearly.
Well, I think knowing what the letters are for your particular count, the code.
Yeah, so you should look up what so in the welcome and instructions for the for that, I think since we had a kind of general ones, it's uses this example of the CAOA BFI, and so you have to, but it does say right at the top, it says on that email, it says what your count area is, the 3-letter code. And again, if there's any confusion about it, please let me know. So Roberta, for example, what I don't have everybody memorized. What area are you birding?
At Lake Merced.
Okay, so yours would be.
I'm seeing SFCB count 13, but I don't think that's
so yours. Excuse me. So this was the one for the Oakland count for the East Bay side, and I don't recall how, off the top of my head, how the San Francisco one is set up. So we'll send an email out to clarify that one.
Yeah, I'm looking at
I don't want to make something up, because I really don't know how. Oh, excuse me. It's still the same. It's still the same one. They still have it's still. Wait, CA.
Like CASF? I don't know.
Right.
There's no CA in the emails. I've got 2 emails.
Yeah, let me
thank you for supporting, and then thank you for signing up.
Right. Let me,
and it just says,
you know what, that's one thing that we didn't talk about with San Francisco. So let me
Dave Assman or
yeah, we'll send an email out to everybody in San Francisco.
Okay.
On the San Francisco count. Thanks for bringing that up, because that was an oversight on our part. Since we had focused on the Oakland count, we neglected to think about it for San Francisco, and but we'll do that. But it'll get set up the same way.
So I have a question. If there's 4 different teams counting in Alameda, we're each going to have our own checklist. So we each submit it, so you get 4 different submissions for Alameda? Yeah.
And it works out for the for this bird count, it's fine, because we're so in general for eBird, it works out fine, because obviously there are thousands and hundreds of thousands of people using eBird every day, and lots of them bird the same areas, and the researchers are able to use the data from all those different people, birding at different times in overlapping areas. It's no problem, and it's great data. And for the Christmas and May bird count, we're counting the number of species for each group for for the little mini competition about the greatest number of species. And so if two different birding groups or two different individuals in the same bird count get the same species, that's fine. Not a problem. It'll show up as one species.
I mean, our
So
teams,
everybody gets to do their own checklists without worrying about overlap.
But yeah, because we've got 4 teams, but we're going to each be birding in different areas of Alameda, so we're not overlapping.
Yeah, so whether
Okay.
you're overlapping or not overlapping, it works out great. And bird as often as you like. You can go out multiple times in the day and bird in your area, and that works out fine too. So it'll be a slightly different in the for the traditional Christmas bird count, but for this one, because we do care more about the in the traditional the Christmas bird count, we do care about counting the number of individual birds, and we don't want to overlap, but it's not a problem here.
If I may ask another question, Viviana, if all 4 of us are sort of, shall we say, a little bit novice at this, and we don't have any one person who feels qualified to lead the charge, and we're all sort of, a little bit doe-eyed or glazy-eyed, what should we do?
So there's a bunch of different options. So one, you could do your checklist when you get home and do it on your computer. Mm-hmm. And not worry about using eBird Mobile if you feel that that's an impediment to your birding at this moment, since you're not familiar with it and none of your colleagues are either. So you could do a paper checklist when you're out in the field. However you would do it if you were trying to keep track of the birds that as you were doing normally, and go back and do it at home on the ebird.org version, so the desktop version. If you're we made the offer for the Christmas bird count, and I guess I'll make the offer again. If you really feel like you can't handle that one, nobody in your group is willing to take that next step and try, send me an email and we'll send the paper checklist from the Christmas bird count, and you can fill out the paper checklist and send it back to us and we'll input it. Obviously we're hoping that this is not an offer that will be picked up by very many people, because that's an extra step on our part, but we'd rather have you have a good time. And if that's going to be a complete impediment to doing so, we'd be happy to help out.
That's a very kind offer. Along with that, would you be willing to post your email address just in case?
Sure. Let me do it.
Let me do
it right now in the chat.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good idea.
So I'll respond to a chat question. The first chat question was somebody asking about their battery draining on their cell phone when they have internet access turned on. My recommendation is to make sure you know exactly where you're birding and keep your records, your checklists, and your field notes on paper and pencil, and input your checklist when you get home instead of trying to use the app in the field. My 2 cents.
So Steve, I have a question in connection with that. I don't usually have a cell signal when I'm back in the canyon in Redwood, going in the Redwood Road entrance. Will this still work for me if I don't have a cell phone signal back there?
Oh, I suggest not going to Redwood if you don't have a cell signal. You really want to be out of cell phone touch? Okay, that's not an answer.
I was going to say, that's facetious, right?
Yes, you don't need a cell phone service. You need location turned on in order for eBird to find your location. But if you have no cell service, you can't, hang on one second.
So Maureen, it works fine. I mean, I bird all the time in places that I don't have cell phone service. And personally, I don't have a problem with it draining even while birding all day, but I guess that depends on your phone and your battery.
No, I was just wondering if we could tell it things like we were on the Redwood Stream Trail hotspot, like even if it couldn't connect with the outside world.
No, you can't. You need to do that when you get cell service. So it will, if you close the checklist without submitting it, and then go somewhere and where you get cell service, and then go in and try to change the location, it will keep the map for the area where you were birding, and it'll show you the hotspots around there. So it's not as if you lose that data. So you don't need to put in, the Redwood Creek hotspot while you're in the field. You can do it, from Starbucks after you quit, or you can do it from home.
Steve, this is Nancy. I think Maureen's question is, if you don't have cell service, is it recording your location? And the answer is yes, it records your location using GPS. You don't have to have cell service for it to know where you are.
Right, but if you don't have cell service, it won't find the hotspots.
But one other thing though is if you've used the Redwood Canyon entrance before on eBird, that you've actually birded there before, it'll be on your recent list of, and you can use it. You can select it because it'll be included there.
Okay,
Right.
I'm going to have fun this week anyway, because I really want to go looking for the pileated woodpecker building a nest. So I'll try this out. I've generally been a pencil and paper eBirder, but I do want to try this out. So I really appreciate this presentation.
Okay, any other questions or comments before we go on? No? Okay. So just a comment about putting in rarities. So here we are out in the field, and we see a California condor. And we don't have the rarities turned on in the checklist, so eBird won't even respond to that, but you can hit tap to search entire database, and there it is. And we're going to see one, and it immediately lights up yellow, and it gives you this little icon. I don't know if you can read it, but it says R. It means it's a rarity. The red dot means it's never been seen in this area. And we don't care. We're going to claim it anyway. So we're going to hit review. Now you see we've got two species, white-crowned sparrow and California condor. And immediately you get this. And it says, California condor, a rare observation, please add comments. And of course, the comments that they want are a lot of details about why it's really a California condor, and not, a crow that somebody spray painted its head red or something. And once again, putting all those details in your phone is a pain. So what I usually do is just put a C as a placeholder and hit done. And when I get home, I put in all the details that will convince the county editor that I really saw what I think I saw. So the only other thing I have to add, we'll submit this bogus checklist with this bogus sighting. And it's now in Ebird, and you can look at it at home on the website. And if you look down here, you see checklists. And if you touch that, you get two tabs. You get a submitted tab, and it's all the various checklists that you've submitted from your phone, including the one we just submitted here. And if you still have not submitted checklists, this is the one that we didn't put any species in, trying to show how to share a checklist. This one still resides on your phone and hasn't been sent to Ebird yet. So the easiest way to deal with this one is to hold your finger down on it and hit delete, and that cleans that up. And you can close checklists on your phone without submitting them. And you know, as I say, take them somewhere, take them to Starbucks and where you've got a cell signal, and change the location, or take them home and clean them up there, or whatever you want to do. And with that, I'm all done. So if anybody's got any questions or comments, ask away. No?
I have a
So
question.
I'll do one comment, is to don't be afraid of Ebird. It's you know, just use it, and it's fairly intuitive, and you'll learn tricks on it as you use it. I have to admit that I just started using it without a lot of instruction in the first place, and I learned some things that made it more efficient later on, but it's pretty easy. Don't get cowed by it.
So I have a question. I'm curious how often we should, like for the Christmas and May bird count, how often we should start new checklists. Like, I mean, can we do one for the entire day, or if we're like every time we go to a different spot, start a new one? I mean, I'm just kind of.
Well, the Ebird Protocol, which you can find on the Ebird website, and they've got a bunch of facts about how to use the application. And if I remember correctly, and I'm probably getting this somewhat wrong, but I think the protocol is 5 miles or 3 hours, whichever comes first.
I think that's right for land.
Yeah, and also if you one good rule of thumb is, if you get back in your car and you go someplace else, start a new checklist.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else? Well, I hope everybody learned something, and I hope you all have fun with Christmas in May. Thanks for doing this, Viviana.
Thank you. And again, for those in San Francisco, we'll get an email out to clear up the confusion about the sharing of the checklist. So we'll make sure that you get that. For those who are in the Oakland area bird count, the instructions show you how to share.
Okay, we'll see you all. Good birding.